I am Ian Seabrook, this is HubNut, and this time I'm testing a 2004 Mitsubishi Magna built here in Australia. Mitsubishi Magna history is quite confusing to the casual observer, especially here in Australia. But in short, Mitsubishi started building cars here in the 1970s, I believe, Gallants and the later Sigma. But by the 1980s, Mitsubishi Australia felt they needed a larger car. So they took a Sigma, made it slightly wider and called it a Magna. And unfortunately in slightly the wrong order, but I should be testing a first generation Magna tomorrow. This is a third generation facelift with a rather distinctive front end styling by Olivier Boulet. You can see the family similarity to the Mitsubishi L200. The Lancer had a facelift like this, as did the Mitsubishi Charisma, I believe. And it has to be said, this is perhaps the most gawky looking Japanese car of this period. It just looks all a bit clumsy. These lights are messy. It's almost as if you looked at a Ford AU Falcon and went, yeah, I want to make something as odd as that. So a very odd machine indeed. So even the rear styling, these lamp clusters look a bit clumsy. The whole design is just a bit messy. I'm not really used to that with Japanese stuff. I mean, some of the Japanese stuff in Japan can be quite fussy with lots of bling and stuff going on, but this just isn't as cohesive as I'd expect. There was one more final evolution for Mitsubishi when they re-engineered this to become the 380 with an even larger engine, and that was the last roll of the dice for Mitsubishi in Australia. It didn't sell well, and Mitsubishi pulled the plug and said goodbye, which is a bit of a shame. We have got such delights as frameless doors going on, so that's quite funky. Even in the back, he says, apparently the central locking isn't working on that door. That's not very Japanese. So we'll see if we can open the bonnet instead, shall we? And we'll see how this car compares with other big Australian saloons. Well, first of all, we've obviously got the fact that it's got a transverse V6 engine, 24 valves, and so is front wheel drive. That makes it quite odd. It also makes cam belt changes interesting. And here comes a helicopter. I've entirely forgotten how much power the engine has. 3.5 litres. I'm going to hazard a guess at somewhere in the region of 200 to 220 brake horsepower. 4-speed automatic transmission, so that's quite a lot of power to be shoving through the front wheels. Note also McPherson front struts. This car was built in Japan, where I think it was sold as a Diamante. This all gets very confusing. Japanese manufacturers do like to make life complicated, but it had entirely different front suspension. They did make wagon versions here as well, which I think were always Diamante badged. I could be wrong in that, but all the estates, regardless of where they were sold around the world, were built in Australia. An awful lot of them have ended up in New Zealand. I saw a lot over there. They look huge and massively cavernous and well worth having. But yes, punchy V6 engine with all of the camshafts. Yeah, it's a robust unit, and it is made in Australia. Even the HT leads. Oh, I should point out, this is a base ES model. It would have had steel wheels originally. It's had the dealer upgrade to the alloys, but that's why it's got things like black door mirrors. And if we actually do jump aboard, we've got seat covers on to protect the rather austere grey upholstery. And yes, it's all a bit austere generally here, I would say. I would say this is a problem with Mitsubishis in general. If you jump in a Mitsubishi Lancer, even an Evo, or a 3000 GTO even, the interiors do feel cheap. This steering wheel is absolutely horrible. It just feels really cheap and nasty. And okay, it is the base model, but still it's awful. Lots of silver going on, which at least breaks up the monotony of the interior otherwise. And you can see we've got air conditioning as you'd expect. So it's starting to look like a rather retro CD player. And there's a little bank of, I don't think anything there. I don't know what that is. That looks like it should be a multifunction display, but I'm not sure it is on this model. I shall find the key and insert it and see if anything lights up. I didn't spot anything when driving here. Oh no, there we go. We've got a clock hidden in there. And there's the aircon in operation. All the dials as you'd expect. You'll notice you've actually got a selector that shows you when you're in 4, 3, 2 or 1. That's because it's a Tiptronic style gearbox. So PRND, and then over here to go up or down the gearbox. Also find the electric window switches here, which is quite a convenient place because it means you can open all 4 windows with one hand, which is quite a good thing when it's really hot. We've got little cubby and cup holders down here, even a biro holder with biro, and another little cubby down here. What we haven't got on the dashboard is a 12-volt power outlet. That is hidden in this box here with the music. Got more in excess on the go down here. So yeah, I'm charging my phone up at the moment using that device. I'm going to turn that off. Again, never leave the key in a car that is modern and could lock itself. I would say that's a proper indicator noise. But yeah, it's fairly comfortable. The seats aren't brilliant. I think these covers probably actually help soften them up a bit. But it's yeah, not a bad place to sit. Nice driving position. Here in the rear, lots of space. I've got headroom. I've got these sort of sculpted head restraints which do nothing but snap your neck. Terrible design. But yeah, plenty of space. I can definitely feel the width back here. I've got fresh air vents as well even. What luxury, electric windows, which I can't test because I haven't left the ignition on. That serves me right. Is that a centre armrest? It is. It has cup holders and it looks like we've got a ski hatch potentially to get into the boot as well. So you can leave your beer in the boot and just reach through and grab it as necessary. So that's a substantial armrest. Which means that the centre seat is actually not too bad. It's not too raised up, so I think it would be reasonably comfortable to sit there. So yeah, the big pillars make it a little gloomy back here, but and the window tint for that matter, but it's not too bad. Not cushioned. Oh dear, Mitsubishi. Now, is there an external button on this boot? I don't think there is. And there's no internal boot release, so I think the boot might be only optional on this. I don't know which button opens the boot. Eventually I managed to convince the smaller button to open the boot, and now we're in. We've got a decent size here. That really is quite enormous. But I can't see a 12-volt power outlet to plug your fridge into, so what you're meant to do, I don't know. Spare wheel is a full-size unit with the jack, first aid kit even, all in place. Superb. So yeah, a big old boot, you'd have to say. And an optional spoiler as well. So there you go, ES, base model, all the poverty. Suspect you'll probably like me to go for a drive, so that's not a bad plan. Oh yeah, I like the door handle that also acts as coin storage. That's quite useful. If I start the engine up, it's got quite a muscular, mischievous almost growl to it. Ooh, I think that sounds more interesting than the competition's engines. But let's go for a drive and see how it actually feels out on the road. Mustn't forget our priorities. Let's do a wiper test. And yeah, a nice pattern there. Comes fairly close to the edge. Good overlap, no triangle of doom. I quite like the fact that the wiper blade on the passenger side sort of under sweeps the arm. I quite like the look of that. There doesn't appear to be a mist function though. What's that? Oh, that must just be the screen wash. We've got variable intermittent nose, so that's good. We've got cruise control, electric mirrors, and the 4 electric windows. So as the base models go, it's not too austere, I should say. Go into drive, which is nice and easy because it's the bottom position. I haven't got the handbrake on because I never do in automatics, just to upset the internet, and we're away. Already I'm thinking this steering wheel feels horrible. It is remarkably cheap. It's the sort of steering wheel you'd expect to find in a £5 city car. It's not what you expect to find in something that seems like a relatively luxurious vehicle. But then I suppose the Australian market does tend to be for lower spec cars with big engines, and that's what this is. So at the time this car was produced, I think Holden had upgraded to the Alloy Tech V6 engine, which was a little bit more refined than the previous engine, which was an old Buick unit. While Ford was using the latest evolution, it would have been up to the Barra spec of 6-cylinder engine. That engine has a very long history. But both the Holden and the Ford, certainly not short of power even. So we shall see how this car compares. Obviously a gravel road isn't really the fairest test area, so we'll go and find the open road and see how things feel. But really this car represents the beginning of the end. This is when manufacturers just went, you know what, building cars in Australia just isn't working for us anymore, which is very sad. We shall not pull out in front of people because that is unfriendly. In fact, there goes a Holden, a fairly late one. Yeah, I'd say it's punchy enough, but I'm just going to pull over because I just want to do a bit of an experiment. Just going to aim at roughly where I want to be. If I take my hands off the steering wheel, you can see the wheel sort of jigging about because torque steer is a very real problem in these cars. They have a lot of torque, and the 380 that came afterwards must surely have been even worse. So it does rather confirm the fact that if you've got power, you really want to send it to the back. They did produce an all-wheel drive version for a time. Obviously Mitsubishi has some experience of building ludicrously powerful four-wheel drives, but that didn't sell in great numbers either. And there was a Rally Art version, but I have a feeling the Rally Art didn't actually have the all-wheel drive system. Oh, nice smiley transit there. So that's a good noise though. That is a very good noise. I like that a lot. It very much reminds me of the 3000 GT or 3000 GTO depending on market, which was kind of the supercar, which still had the cheap interior, but it does make some very, very beguiling noises. That used a similar four-wheel drive system, so it's quite unusual to have four-wheel drive with a transverse engine. Or it certainly was for a time. I think it's become a little bit more common lately. But certainly in the 90s and even into the early 2000s, that was considered a bit odd. There was that brief spell in the 1990s where every manufacturer seemed to have a 4x4, and they were almost all utterly rubbish, made with transfer gears that just weren't up to the job. I think Mitsubishi has some decent experience of making a decent four-wheel drive system. But it's certainly a nice peaceful car. There's not too much wind noise despite those frameless doors. It seems to hang on well enough in the bends. The gearbox seems nicely behaved. I mean, I can sort of knock it into Tiptronic, and now it's showing me I'm in second. I mean, the red line doesn't even start until 6,000. Which we're certainly not going to get anywhere near at legal speeds. Not in second. The ride seems pretty good. Occasionally gets a little bit crashy, but by Japanese standards, I'd say it's quite soft and comfortable. Clearly engineered for Australian tastes. Yes, a typical car for Australia, really. It's big, comfortable, kind of effortless to drive with the cruise control and the aircon. You've got what you need. So yeah, I can definitely see why these cars appealed, but it does feel a bit like I'm driving along in you know, the end of the history. I'm here in Australia just as it's been announced that Holden is going to vanish. It's the end of Holden, and yeah, in many ways these Mitsubishis sort of really do signify the end. This was the start of it all going a bit wrong. It will go to £6,000, yeah. But it doesn't really feel like it wants to go to £6,000. It feels like all the power is sort of mid-range. It's mid-range punch, which is making this car so good. And it's not too keen, it's not too desperate to kick down and sort of get down to higher revs. This example has done 167,599 kilometers. Here we go. Yeah, I mean, that's acceleration uphill. That's plentiful, I would say. Oh, that is a nice noise. And I've also just been I just had a Mitsubishi Magna Estate drive past me, so they weren't badged as Diamante here. Those must be imports, and maybe I haven't seen any Diamantes here, and they've all been Magna based. I did see a lot of them in New Zealand though, where they were probably exported, no doubt. So there you go. Now you know much more about Magnas and Diamantes than you wish you ever had. So there we go, that was the third generation Mitsubishi Magna, and the penultimate Mitsubishi built in Australia. It's not a particularly interesting car like many Mitsubishis of this era, but a very competent one. And if you can live with the slightly unusual looks, then yeah, it's a distinctive one. I prefer a better colour. They do come in a very nice metallic red. White just isn't really a colour. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that road test. It's good to try something a bit different, even if you don't fall in love with it. Yeah, it does the job nicely. It's a pleasant car to drive. It's just not a thrilling or particularly interesting drive. So I shall say thank you very much for watching. Don't forget you can head to the HubNut store and buy all manner of goodies if you so wish. If you head to hubnut.org, you can also find various support options. And I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Au revoir.